minutes and we'll get going for anyone else at that time. But since it is 6:30, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask everyone to stand where you are virtually and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hoorah.
All right, and can I get a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda as listed?
Second. Whoop. I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Loyer.
I'll make them both. I'll make them both. Why not?
Motion by Mr. Loyer. I will second that. Any discussion on the agenda? All right, everything tonight will be a roll call vote. Mr. Martin's a yes. Mrs. Fishman?
Yes.
Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Loyer?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
Mr. Hoyt?
Yes.
And Mrs. Sunday?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Pearl, that's your order, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any
just
order is good.
I know, but I'm trying to make it easier on Pearl, and she gives me a nice order to call everyone every time, and very often I just do my own thing. So I'm trying to do good for you, Pearl. All right, so I'm just going to take a second here and check the chat window. I don't believe we have anyone that has asked to address the board. Do you see anything, Tom, or anyone else?
Nope.
All right, if for some reason you're late or having troubles with that, just go ahead and type it in there at any point. We can do something closer to the end of the meeting if someone does kind of come in behind that. But being that currently we don't have anything, we'll move into items for voting. And so I will make a motion for item D in its entirety. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Loy. Any discussion on D? All right, Mr. Martin is a yes. Mrs. Fishman?
Yes.
Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson?
Yes.
Mr. Loyer?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
Mr. Hoyt?
Yes.
And Mrs. Sunday.
Yes.
All right, before I ask for a motion for item E, I just want to first, it's a pretty large grouping in here in the consent agenda. So before we make a motion for the entire thing, is there any item that someone needs pulled out or to discuss first, or are we good taking E in its entirety? All right, then I will make a motion for item E in its entirety. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Wood. And we'll open it up for discussion. I'd like to start turning over to Mr. Colabufo for discussion for item E10, the intermunicipal agreement for legal services. And he can give us an update and fill us in on that.
Yeah, Andy, before I do that, there was someone just put something into the chat. Do you want me to say what I put here or go on?
No, go on. We'll address that later.
Okay.
Yeah, but we will address it.
Okay, so the intermunicipal agreement. So basically, I was notified about 2.5 weeks ago that Bethany Centrone was leaving Bond, Shennick and King. So when about 5 years ago, we had made a decision to go with a different law firm. The district was kind of dealing with a lot of different things. Some of the big issues were contracts and how they were written and tenure and whatnot. So at that point, we realized we wanted to go with a change. And we heard wonderful things about Bethany Centrone. A lot of school districts use her through Bond, Shennick and King. So we made that move. So when she told me that she was leaving Bond, Shennick and King, my heart kind of dropped, because whenever we need her for anything, we can call her at 10 o'clock at night. She picks up. We call her on a Sunday morning. She picks up. Her customer service is just amazing. And I know Connie's on here and she'll vouch for that 100% because when I told Connie that she was leaving Von Shennick King, Connie's heart dropped. Here's the good news. She's leaving Von Shennick King to be able to work in the Capital Region BOCES for her law services, as well as her HR and labor relations. That part is on the COSER. Right now, we have labor relations and we have that part of the COSER through OCM BOCES, HR and labor relations through them. And we are going to keep that for right now with OCM. But the other part that we are going to then switch over is just our legal services. So all we need to do is have this intermunicipal agreement that basically says we are going to have Bethany Centrone is our lead counsel. So the only thing that's going to change is her email, and the rates will be significantly lower because when you work in a school district realm, as she would at Capital Region BOCES, not only are the rates a lot lower because it's a school district, which is non-for-profit, but there's no retainer. So it's a win-win for us. When I asked her why she would leave Von Shennick King after being a partner, nothing against Von Shennick King, but her heart when she went into law was to work for non-for-profit, not to go into it for the profit side of it. So it's a huge win for us because we'll still be able to do everything we do through her, which is wonderful. We'll still leave Von Shennick King as one of the board-approved law firms. We just won't be paying. Once you guys sign this, we'll send tomorrow an email to Von Shennick King. We'll notify them, and that stops our retainer payments. We still have Friends in Ferrara on our board-approved law list as well that we can use them at any time. Doesn't cost us any money, just have it there. But we could always use them if we wanted to as well. The good news is we'll be able to stay with Bethany Centrone. And so we're very excited about that.
Yeah.
All right, so any questions on that particular one, E10? All right, so we'll open it up for discussion for any of the items. And I'd like to start with E11. I don't know if this is doable or difficult or not, Mr. Colbufo, but on the memorandum of agreement, it states that the last whereas the district wishes to limit or preclude in-person spectators. I'd like to change that to say that the district must comply with Oswego County Health to limit or preclude spectators, because that is not our wish. Is that a problem?
No problem.
All right. So I'd like to make that change to it. Any more discussion on 11? Any discussion on anything in E? All right. Mr. Martin is a yes. Mrs. Fishman?
Yes.
Mrs. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson?
yes,
Mr. Loy?
Yes.
Mr. Patch?
Yes.
Mr. Hoyt?
Yes.
And Mrs. Sundin?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. With that, we move into special presentations, and it's great that we have one tonight. It's nice to break up these virtual meetings that sometimes just get clipping along and through. So we wish we were in person, but Mr. Colbufo, I don't know who we're turning it over to, so I'll let you do that.
That'll be Mr. Penrod, Mr. King, and Mrs. Smolnick, but Connie is putting the stuff in right now to be able to pull up their presentation.
Good evening, Board of Education. This is Matt Penrod. I believe that you should be able to see me. As the building principal of the middle school, it's my pleasure to present to you tonight. And Mr. King and Mrs. Smolnick are also here. I think it'll be easier to just hear from one of us and follow one of us along. So Ms. Galvan is going to get the presentation loaded the rest of the way. And the presentation we have for you tonight is really just a report and update on the goals in our school comprehensive education plan, or SEP plan. The You're several slides ahead, Ms. Geller. And just one. Okay. You may recall that this is the third year of the 2-year plan that we were put on by New York State based on our performance in the ELA and math assessments, as well as our chronic absenteeism rates at the middle school. And as such, we needed to select 5 goals or areas of growth. We needed to choose ELA, math, and chronic absenteeism. And the committee that we put together also chose a couple survey questions from surveys that we needed to give to students in particular that in the end really had to do with social emotional learning, which I'm sure you've heard quite a bit about during the pandemic. So it's worked out well and dovetailed with what we're trying to do. It is the third year of the 2-year plan because the plan was extended a year due to their measurement methods. One of the measurement methods is the end of the year results on math and ELA assessments. You can go ahead a slide, which obviously is challenging when they did not give the math and ELA assessments last year. Currently, there is a plan in place to give them this year, or that's what we've heard so far. They have not been canceled, that's for certain. Another issue with trying to measure things with the math and ELA assessments is there a summative assessment at the end of the school year or towards the end of the school year, and we definitely need to have mid-year benchmark assessments. So we utilize the STAR assessments in ELA and math to do that with. They are somewhat predictive of the results on the math and ELA state assessments, but not a direct correlation. So when we talk about our ELA and math goals, the mid-year benchmarks don't line up exactly with the end of the year goals because those are against state assessments, which were not given in the past. So we did complete STAR assessments remotely this year in September, October, and then just again in January. You can move forward a slide. Our mid-year goal in ELA was that we wanted 49% of our students testing in the 40th percentile or higher on the STAR reading assessment. We picked that based on where students had scored last year and in previous years at the mid-year rank of the STAR assessment. Our results this year were not 49%, they were 42%. In math, our students fare better, and our mid-year goal was for 71% of our students to be testing at the 40th percentile or higher in STAR math, and we fell short of that by 10% or 61%. And there are definitely some potential reasons for that. I think we're all very well aware that there's been some disruption to a normal instructional year and how we're working with kids starting last year in March and continuing this year, even though I think we're doing an excellent job with our remote learning plan. Also, we know that STAR results in September typically are high and then drop down in January and then go back up at the end of the year. They're fairly cyclical like that on a yearly basis. Also, there's a huge difference in testing situations than there are normally. It's a lot different to say to students, okay, sit at home and take this assessment that we know should take you between 25 and 35 minutes and do it versus doing it here in school on your Chromebook. We obviously can tell fairly easily who's putting the most effort in, and when somebody has only spent 4 minutes clicking on every answer, we don't have anywhere near as much control of that when students are at home anxious to get to their next soap opera or possibly their next class. So we definitely know that we need more work there. We've done a lot of things to improve those results. I do think those results will go up on the next STAR assessment that we do give, because like I say, they're cyclical, but we definitely missed our mid-year benchmark on those 2 pieces. Next slide. Some things that we did to work towards improving ELA and in math. A big piece for both was a curriculum audit that was conducted in the summer of 2020, which really allowed us to prioritize curriculum. We've got shortened days this year, shortened instructional days, and remote learning has definitely cut into time. So we did take the opportunity to do a curriculum audit, which helped allow us to prioritize our curriculum, really focus in on what we are going to be teaching, which has been a benefit with those shortened days. In ELA, we've done some reading training with our entire ELA department. We're using data meetings in ELA and reading, and actually in all the core area teachers, where teachers are looking at a specific problem or issue or concept and once a month. They basically do a pretest. They teach that skill / strategy, and then do some sort of cumulative assessment to see how we've done on reaching that, on doing better with that skill and strategy. And we've done all those things in all the content areas. Math isn't focused on necessarily discrete skills, but it came to light last year. One of the big problems we have with, I would say people in general have, middle school kids definitely have, is multi-step problems, where there's 3 steps to finding the answer. And kids will read some of the instructions, if any, and get through the first part or first part and a half and never fully answer the question. We see that on the state assessments. We see that in class. So math really focused more on multi-step problem solving than on changing content for each of their data meetings. But again, both groups in all the core area classes have worked on data meetings, math, English, social studies, and science, to improve those things. And the other areas have also worked on multi-step problems in conjunction with the math department, but in their own area. So that's occurred in monthly department meetings, and it's been by each grade level. So it's really been able to focus the instruction, and again, the pre-assessment, then working on the task, and then the final task has really been better than we're doing something that's going to already occur, is already something that's part of the curriculum, instead of just gathering data for the sake of gathering data or taking a random test. It's been really focused on things that were happening in the content. Chronic absenteeism, as I'm sure you know, is the percentage of students who miss 10% or more days in the school year, or for a 180-day school year, that would be 18 days or more. In 2018-19, we were at 18.5% of our students were considered chronically absent. Our goal for 2021 was 17.1%, and we're actually around December 23rd, we were at about 10.2% as far as chronic absenteeism. So there's been a large drop in the number of students considered chronically absent. And part of that really has to do with how students receive attendance credit. It used to be you had to show up in school to receive attendance credit. And this year, because you can be present, you can sign in synchronously, you can sign in asynchronously, it's more aligned to individual kids' schedules. We think that definitely has helped decrease the chronic attendance issues that we were having. We've also planned, as part of the plan, to put some things in place which have been a little bit challenging with remote learning, but we have been able to implement some tutoring. Sometimes kids don't come to school because they are struggling in school, and who wants to go to a place where you don't feel successful. So we've been able to offer some individual after-school tutoring, although virtually, still being able to offer that so kids feel successful and confident in attending school. We've had an attendance committee who's really looked at putting processes in place when kids are chronically absent. Again, a bit challenging. Some of the interventions that we had and listed and we're going to do were obviously interfered with remote learning. We've done team newsletters to try and keep families up to date so they know what their students should be doing. And we've actually wanted to have a lot of after-school clubs and activities. We've been able to offer a few this year. We have a knitting and crocheting online club that actually is doing some interesting stuff. The student leadership group has been able to have weekly meetings, and those kids have put together some activities that other students have been able to do. And there'll be drama club has just started, and there'll probably be more as we move forward and teachers get a little bit more creative and more comfortable with their craft moving forward. But we do know when school is in session or now, those things help build relationships, build a connection. So kids want to come to school in a place where they feel like they belong and where they're being successful. Next slide. We picked 2 survey questions in particular to zone in on. And one of them was, in this school, students respect one another. You can see the 2019 results, unless you've put the board members over top of it, in which case you can't see them, like me. But in 2019-20, 45% of the students surveyed agreed that students respect one another. And in 2021, our mid-year success rate was 67%. We wanted to go up 5% at the mid-year rate, and we've actually gone up quite a bit more than that. There are definitely some reasons for that, and we'll get into Positivity Project and things like that. But moving a little bit forward, one of the things to recognize is also, before we get too excited about having such overwhelming success, when students were in school, we could make sure they all took the survey, and the percentage was lower of students who took the survey than it was in person. So that's definitely something to be aware of. And make sure that we don't just think that we've done wonderful, fantastic things all the way around, but there might be some mitigating factors, although I do think we've done an awful lot with students respecting one another. The next slide is the other survey goal, which was at this school, students work on listening to others to understand what they're trying to say. 2019-20, 50% of students agree with that. Our mid-year goal was again to go up 3% and 5% by the end of the year. And as you can see, we went up 19% for the mid-year goal. So quite a bit higher than where we had been. We had some really interesting discussions about this, and we'll continue to have them amongst ourselves and with the kids. The survey results kind of came back at around the same time political things were happening. And one of the things that came to light was, what do kids think respect means? And what does listening to somebody else mean? And that's a big question. And we know we have to really stress that with students, because I may listen to what you have to say, and I may respect you, and I may not change my mind and agree with you. And that doesn't mean that I don't respect you and wasn't listening to you. It just means I didn't change my mind. So making sure kids know that difference, that we can listen to each other, be respectful of each other, but that doesn't mean we have to always agree. And there's ways that we can disagree, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a bad thing. And it doesn't mean the negative of there is an actual lack of respect. Those questions are very connected to our social emotional check-in questions. I think you saw some more creative examples at the high school level, maybe some Avengers memes and stuff like that when the high school did their presentation. Some of ours are pretty basic, but just making sure kids know that we're checking in on them. We use these for attendance. We care about how they're doing, and it gives them an opportunity to share if there's anything that a teacher can help them with, or if a teacher needs to refer them to their school counselor or something we need to call home about. And it's been very helpful to keep track of those things, as well as the attendance piece. But kids have used them to check in, and kind of, it's very hard when everybody is a 1.5 by 1.5 inch square on your screen. It is very challenging to read body language and know if somebody's laughing or smiling, if they're even appearing on screen. So those SEL check-in questions have been huge to help us check in on the kids and how they're doing. And this slide and the next one are just examples of that. You can go to the next slide. These are just some SEL supports, social emotional learning supports that we shared in a parent newsletter. And we have a lot of supports at the middle school. Our school counselors, we've got social worker assistants that are in the building and available online all the time. We have an Arise school-based mental health worker who is very active in looking for clients and helping us with students in need, and Farnham Services, who provides counseling services to students who are at risk for all kinds of behaviors, including chronic absenteeism and dropping out. So those are things that we publicize to parents through our newsletter. We very much focused on the Positivity Project this year. Last year was kind of a building thing, and it continues to be, but we've really moved the Positivity Project as a focus thing to our PE staff this year, who've done a really good job. Positivity Project, P2 provides a lot of resources and helps us share terms and concepts with our staff. And what we've asked the PE teachers to do is go through the videos and talk about that, especially how they can connect to phys ed when you're talking about integrity and playing golf. And do you kick your ball back into the fairway and say that's where you found it, or do you kick your opponent's ball into the woods and say that's where they found it? Doing what's right, whether people are watching or not, and how they can tie that into PE. And what we've asked the rest of our folks to do is make natural connections within their own class and within their own content. It doesn't always make sense to tie things together, but in a lot of ways, what we're teaching in class ties right into the weekly character traits that Positivity Project shares with us. So make those natural connections, those natural teaching moments that we have.
Mr. Penrod, I just want to point out that your example of moving my golf ball onto the fairway is a little bit mean, but that's all right.
I have a really awesome joke about that. I'll share with you sometime. It's only mean if you take it that way. It could have just been an accident. I picked that one. We did also survey the parents at the same time we surveyed the students. And one of the things that the parent survey didn't give us necessarily a ton of things that we hadn't seen before, thought of before. But one of the things on the next slide that we talked about was parents definitely want to see even more online activities, which we've been trying to accommodate, again, with the student leadership group stepping up and trying to do a couple after school things and planning spirit weeks like favorite sweatshirt day today. And I know one of the days this week is crazy hair day. I swear they pick that every time just to mess with me. But parents definitely would like to see more online activities to get their kids engaged with. And one thing that some parents reported being aware of resources available for student needs or things we're doing in regard to character education or in some of the other survey questions. And that really what that pointed out to us was an overall trend was we're doing some things, but if we're not advertising them and making sure the parents know that we're doing them, are we really doing them? And are we really engaging our parents as partners like we would want to? So the last several weeks, as the Positivity Project sends us out resources, the parents have been getting a weekly email/text with the character traits, and there have been some awesome videos to share with families and to go over together that can allow parents to really join in and help us out with that. And sharing those the newsletter with the social emotional supports to folks has really been a huge thing. A lot of parents thank me for that, and it's not that we didn't have them before. We just weren't sharing them as well as we could have been, and that's one of the things the parent survey really helped us note. So the next slide, just kind of in general, at the middle school, things have changed, but things have not changed at all. We care about middle school kids, all kids, but really middle school kids, or else we would not be doing our jobs. Remote learning is tough. Not having kids in front of us is tough, and we really do like and miss our middle school kids. We've tried to make it let parents know, let kids know, if we know there's an issue, we've got a chance of helping. Sometimes we can't help, but at least we know that there's an issue, and we've really tried to work on creating a partnership with parents so they know what's going on and know what our expectations are. And I think in a lot of cases that's paid some good dividends. So next slide pretty much says it all. Don't know if anybody has any questions, but we would welcome taking them now.
So, Mr. Penrod, and it's, I guess, I don't know that it can be answered right now, but I guess one of the things I thought of when you were going over the test results, the ELA and math, I'm just wondering, and Tom, I know we kind of cut forecast 5 due to budgetary and everything, but is there anyone that is already gathering information to compare those results year to year based on the, whether you're using a hybrid or fully remote or fully in-person model now to, I know it can't be all attributed to the model, but I'm just wondering if anyone is measuring that or has looked at it yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing to compare it to. So at the middle school, we are fully remote as we are at the high school. So it's going to be very hard to find a time when, where we could compare those numbers to.
Yeah, no, what I meant is
Year to year.
our year-over-year results compared to other districts that may or may not be using the same model.
I have some information. So starting February 1st, we now have to report the modality of instruction, not just whether kids are here or not here. So we have to report if the kid is totally in person, hybrid, or some combination. And people in these meetings have been asking why, and I think the state is collecting that data for that very reason, so that down the road they can look at some longevity data to see what kind of impact all of this had on learning.
But didn't I see that the state testing for this year was canceled? Last year it was canceled as well, right? No,
Only January regions have been canceled.
not grades 3 to 8.
No,
The state applied for a waiver because we're required to give them by the federal government, even though they're state assessments. The state applied for a waiver under the previous federal administration, which was denied. And in the last couple days has applied for a waiver under the current administration, which nobody knows the result of at this point in time. So the 3 through 8 tests are planned to move forward with at this time.
Did they get postponed or canceled last year?
They did.
They were canceled last year.
Right, but shouldn't we be collecting that data?
Collecting what data, Christy?
Not us, but I mean, in general, the state and the federal government, I mean, isn't that data going to be important to determining what Andy's talking about with respect to, the impact that all of this and the different instruction and online education and all that stuff has had? I mean, we just don't have the data. If they get the waiver, for instance, for grades 3 to 8, there's going to be 2 years of missing data, at least with respect to state testing, during this pretty critical time period. I mean, I think it'll spill over into years that follow, certainly, because these kids aren't going to just, rubber band back to what they should have been had they been in school full time. And so I guess that's kind of my question is, I understand that, the challenges that the students and the teachers and everybody's faced and why, the testing and the rigor and the stress might be viewed as, too much, or we couldn't get to the material or whatnot, but wouldn't having that data be helpful? I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt.
No, absolutely. Actually, Aaron and I have had many conversations about this year. Aaron, if you want to jump in, it's kind of a perfect segue to what we were talking about, where it would give parents the opportunity, even if their kids are remote, to be able to, have them come into school to take it. If you want to jump in, go ahead.
We looked, because at first we thought that all families kind of that we had to get all of our kids in. So we're trying and working with the principals to try to put together a plan within the 6 feet rule and a schedule and all this stuff. But they came out with a new code, a not tested code, so that we don't get kind of hurt by having that opt-out piece. So students who are remote have the option. It's this new code. However, if we have parents who want to have their kids come in, after February break, I'm going to be putting together kind of a testing update if we have one, that if parents wanted their children to come in and take the assessment, because some parents do, and they want to see how their children are doing it, up against everybody in the state. So, we just ask that they let their principal know so that we can make locations and accommodations and things like that to allow for that. But parents won't need to because of this new code. So it's kind of that if you want to have your child take it, contact the building principal. If not, there's going to be a not tested code for the kids who are remote. What we're trying to determine, and I've got an email into the state, is our kids who are in person, because we do have kids who come every day at the middle school. If we have to have those, because they're not there all day, if we have to have them take it, myself and the BOCES, from what we've been reading, if kids are in person, the expectation is that they take it unless their parents, have them opt out. But so we send it to the state for clarification, and the state doesn't have an answer. They have no idea. So,
well, just full transparency, the kids that we have coming to the middle school are our most neediest kids. So if they're going to use that as the subset of our middle school, 6 through 8 testing, the chance of the success rate is going to be skewed.
So that's kind of where we are right now. Hopefully after February break, because the waiver is out for feedback. So parents have, I believe parents have an opportunity to take feedback. School building administrators, district level administrators I know Connie and I and Tom and Irena filled out the waiver and, or the feedback piece and put our stuff in there. I don't know. We'll wait and see.
And Chris, the overall feedback that I'm receiving from other school districts that have had middle school in session is that the parents who are saying that they can't go by those numbers because their children have only really had 2 days of instruction a week, because the other 3, it's pretty much non-existent for instruction, because again, the
Right,
teachers are,
but that's kind of my point, is that shouldn't we have that data to,
Right.
be able to look at that and say, yeah, this doesn't work. We shouldn't, this isn't something that should be considered as
that's what I was-
successful, is
yeah.
Yeah,
I knew
that's
you were
what-
asking a
exactly what I
rhetorical
was-
question. Correct, because I agree with you.
Yeah, it's as if, as is not unusual for the state, but they're being an ostrich sticking their head in the sand. Like, do we want to measure
Right.
the impact of what this does or not? I mean,
Right.
they're all about standardized testing until the time when it would probably benefit us the most.
Agreed.
right, exactly. That's what I'm saying, so.
Yep.
All right. Sorry, Mr. Penrod, to derail that a little bit. Other
No, that's-
questions or feedback for
Yeah,
middle school presentation?
Yeah, I do. Could you talk a little bit, if we had, I'm going to talk about the chronic absenteeism numbers. I mean, if we had that improvement, if school was normal in the way it was, and if it dropped by that percentage, we would be lauding, right? We'd be extremely excited about what we did, right? To have the numbers down. So is that, what do you think caused the numbers to go down? And what do you think would be the lessons learned from that going forward? So if we go back to normal, what do you think caused those numbers to go down, and what can you take away as a positive? I mean, the measurement and the testing we think was going to be negative, but this is, to me, is a positive, right?
Yeah.
And the numbers went down significantly.
Can I, before you answer that, Matt, can I just throw in on top of Steve? If a student logs in and is on for 6 minutes, they're considered not absent, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, so now you can answer. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah. I don't know that it leads us to any specific practices that are going to improve our chronic absenteeism numbers. We know things that improve chronic absenteeism numbers are having programs that help kids be successful, feel smart, and get them involved and make connections with adults at school and make them want to be at school. And I don't know that we've been overly successful in having, obviously, as many of those as we would have in person. I think probably the bigger trend that it shows is when you have students have multiple opportunities and multiple ways to check in and sign in and do stuff, they're more likely to do it. What the number doesn't track is, were they there for 6 minutes? Were they there and engaged for the entire time? That's why I'm only cautiously optimistic about the drop. We also know that historically the numbers go down. Well, the chronic absenteeism number climbs in the wintertime as the weather gets better. I'm not 100% sure why, but the number tends to go up in between around February break. It's harder to get kids in school. I think we'll see less of that this year, because the ones that are showing up virtually for the most part at the middle school. But I think it shows, if we give kids alternative ways of accessing their instruction, there's a better chance of them participating in their instruction. So, yes.
But we don't want to mislead either. So for attendance credit during regular in-person, if they come and they're there first period and they leave 15 minutes later because they got sick, they're still there for the whole day. So it's not any different through the remote if they log in for 6 than it would be if they were in person, because that's the way attendance credit is awarded. The difference now, that's overall attendance. We still do period by period, and you'll see that on a report card. Like, they may have only got through one first block, but that's not how it's reported to the state for chronic absenteeism. So all it is your homeroom attendance that goes to chronic absenteeism. So I didn't want anybody to think that it's different. But like he said, because they have a different means to do it asynchronously, that is something that they obviously didn't have when we were normal.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the point that I was hoping to hear, because I don't want it to be missed going forward, is that this big change is that might have some positives to it. And what I don't want to have happen is that is that the things that are positive out of this just be, well, everybody's back to school and we're just getting back to the way it was. And if it helps us solve some of the critical things that you're trying to get solved, I want to be, supportive of, it might be better for a student to be asynchronized learn at home. Might be better for them.
It really might be. It offers an option that we didn't have before. And clearly there are some kids, there are kids whose parents have talked to me and say they're doing better this way than they ever would have in person. They like this about it and this about it, and it was never an option before. And we certainly have had students who've shown up and checked out from class before, even though they were physically present, doesn't mean they were mentally present. And
hey, Matt,
so
let's just call it what it is. The loudest parents are the ones that are going to say, no, this whole thing was terrible. And here's the deal. There were a lot of horrible parts with this that none of us are negating, but it doesn't negate the fact that there are some parents that have seen certain things like you just said. You hit the nail on the head, Steve and Matt, that there are some things that have worked for some families. And it gives us the opportunity to look at that going forward to make sure that, when all of the dust settles and we're back to normal, that we can look to say, how can we still improve?
yeah, we got to make sure we don't throw everything out, because there are some positives happening in this very negative situation.
Yeah, and if you tie it back to, our attributes, right? We can't preach on one hand, lifelong learning and being adaptable and all that, and then not take something good out of this, because it's a great point. It actually would be great for us to be very proactive in this. And, because the reality is that something as unwieldy as whether it's state ed or the federal education department, they're not likely to adapt a whole lot out of this, other than let's get them back and return to quote normal, or back to what it was. Let's return to better. And so I just love this conversation. It's really good because I think it speaks. I know my daughter is thriving in this. That is not to say, I understand truly that there are kids out there that are not. And so I'm not minimizing it. But that, the different learning styles have been highlighted for sure with this. So.
Yeah, and I think it plays into it, and I am no means an educator, but it goes back to Tom, originally, when I got on differential learning, right? And to me, this is just a different way to approach something. And I think it was forced change, but if we can take some of this and make it better, I think it's something I could fully support. And I just, I couldn't say it enough. So thanks.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions on the presentation?
Yeah, this
Great
is
job, Matt.
Kathy.
Oh, sorry.
Can you guys hear
Mrs.
me?
Sunday?
Yep, I can hear you, Kathy.
All right. And I'm not positive this applies to middle school. I know at least at the high school, there are, we've always had home tutored children. So I think it would be curious to see for them statistically, if they're doing better in a situation like that. I don't even know if they're integrated into the virtual classrooms now. But for them, not being in the school buildings has been the norm. And how are they doing this year compared to years?
So I can speak to that. We don't have any tutors going into homes for the same exact reasons. We would be under the same constraints because that's just a movement of a classroom into someone's house. So obviously I can't do social distancing. I can't do all the protective stuff that I would need to do. So the kids that would normally be, on homebound because they're out of the school are checking in virtually, and they're handling it fine. We've had a couple of kids that the parents are saying, hey, this isn't working for them. But I will say that those are the kids that weren't rocking it with the tutor either. They were the ones that were canceling their tutoring, not working with their tutors in the past. When we have some of those kids that are struggling, both my principals at both levels, all the principals have done a great job of giving some additional one-on-one tutoring. It's still virtual, but they have somebody that's right in there with them, doing some one-on-one or two-on-one stuff with them. So the kids are handling it. It's ironic, that might be one of those changes, Steve, that sticks.
Yeah, I think it's a way of addressing students who are absent or out of school that we've not for long term that we have not had and utilized in the past, and I could see it continuing moving forward in some fashion.
Yeah, because they're still getting to make some connections with their peers that they weren't making when they were on homebound and isolated into their homes.
Mhm.
So they know the kids. They might only know them as a name on a screen, but they are in a breakout room with them. They are having some of those interactions. Some of the kids I've talked to, they had a harder time last year than this year.
Yeah.
When we first transitioned last year, there was some issues, and I was even doing some like checking connects and working with some of the kids. This year, I have not received. I have one family that has brought some issues forward, but the issues aren't any different than they have been over the last 4 years that the student has been on homebound. So
There are students in districts that are receiving cancer treatments that can't be in school for prolonged periods of time. They were doing this synchronous, simultaneous instruction long before COVID. So it really has opened our eyes for those students that may, let's say they have mono and they're going to be home, but they're okay to be able to zoom in and see, what's going on. It's just opened our eyes for opportunities to make sure that students don't fall through the cracks when they have to be home for prolonged periods of time.
Just one final, I guess, food for thought. And Mr. Penrod, Mrs. Smolnick, Mr. King, everyone can just take it. I don't know that we do this, but as we get into the second half of the year and hopefully even more opportunities open up for activities, clubs, after school and everything, just hopefully we are looking very specifically as those opportunities open up to make sure that kids that in previous years would have been engaged and now aren't, like, I'm assuming that that's one of those red flag is not the term I want to use because I know that connotation is bad, but something that might be a signal that there's an opportunity to engage with them and get them out. Because I just, in our circle of friends, I know that the ones that have the opportunities to get engaged, that no matter how well they were or weren't doing in school, they're doing even better once that happens. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. So in my closing, if that was the last question, I just want to thank all of you for the leadership that you've provided. I'm sure this was not what, just like I didn't know I was signing up for this when I went to principal school. I'm sure when you took the high paying position as a school board member, you did not know what you all were getting yourselves in for either. And just want to say thank you very much for your leadership. It's been huge for our community and for our schools. So thank you.
Great presentation, Matt.
Yep, great job. And on behalf of the entire board, and we'll certainly do something on our own, but please send our sincere thanks to all the staff. We know how difficult it is. And I've always said I could never be a teacher anyway, and I could certainly never be a middle school teacher. And now heap onto that a middle school teacher during a pandemic. All the kudos in the world, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Maureen for fiscal stress and property tax cap presentation.
give me a second to fight with this.
Okay.
Maureen, you should point out, because I think it's a statewide thing that they call it fiscal stress, but it's very negative. It should be called like fiscal strength or fiscal stability or something.
We'll write for them to retitle it.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, right.
It is a good little tool though, and I haven't done this presentation in a couple years, but I kind of pulled it back out again because the scores came out just a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to review how ours was calculated and then put a couple of years into the system to look at what it is that we've been talking about with our fund balance.
Give me 1 second, Maureen. I got to get back to the agenda.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's fighting with me. You guys are going to learn Spanish in a minute. Right, got it. All right. So I'm clicking fiscal stress because that was just Zoom stress right there. Is that what I'm clicking, Maureen?
Yes, please. Awesome. So the fiscal stress system is a program that's put out by the Office of the State Controllers to basically, yep, keep going, Connie. Next one. They've put this little package together basically to identify solvency within districts or cities, towns, villages. So the way it works, yep, keep going, is they take financial and environmental indicators and they put them in little calculated systems and pop out a score. So for school districts, they've got 4 different key drivers of indicators. They use the year-end fund balances, the operating deficits or surpluses, your cash positions, and if we have any reliance on short-term debts. For the environmental indicators, they're using the economically disadvantaged numbers, which is our free and reduced, our class sizes, our teacher turnover rates, our assessed property values, our budget vote approval rates, and English language learners, which we don't score there because we don't have any. So essentially, they take all of those indicators, they put them into a scoring system, and they give you a designation. And there's 4 levels. There's no designation up to significant stress. And that runs on a score up to 100, but it's not a 1-for-1. Like no designation is between 0 and 25, but then it's 25 to 45 gives you susceptible, and it moves on from there. So go ahead, Connie. So our scores came out again just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and our district has, again, for fiscal stress, no designation and no score, but we're starting to move a little bit on the environmental stress. We still have no designation, but we do have a 15% score there. So first I wanted to hit the fiscal indicators because those are the ones that come right off of our ST3s. So our numbers go into the systems. This comes right off the ST3 with everybody else that files them. So the indicator number 1, which is the unassigned fund balance. Now remember, this is where we left that money in here at the end of the year. If you look at Central Square compared to all the schools in the system, we're 0.8 higher. If you look at us compared to Central New York, we're about 2.8% higher. So we have a really good unassigned fund balance right now, which we know we do. We specifically left it there for what we know might be coming. Indicator number 2, the next one, is fund balance, but this is the reserves. So again, as we talk about our reserves, Central Square's reserves are generally lower than all schools and definitely lower to our peer group, which is the Central New York schools. And these little graphs are great because you get the state, all schools, and then our Central New York.
And Maureen,
yep.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand this one. So when it says 21.8, are we saying that, just as an example, if you had $100 in your budget, you have $21.80 in reserves?
Reserves, yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the operating surplus deficit is indicator number 3, which is really easy. It's basically expenses against revenues. Our revenues came in obviously higher this year than expenditures. This is the year that we closed, June 30th. So we're looking very well there, strong operating setup as compared to all schools and Central New York schools. Go ahead, Connie. Indicator number 4 is our cash investment. And basically this one is the same. They take your total expenditures divided by 12. How much cash do you need every month? Look at your cash and make sure that you have more than enough cash to operate your system. And if you go to the next indicator, number 5, there are schools out there that don't have enough cash to operate. Ours again is the monthly cash versus the expenditures. And then when you go to number 6, those schools that don't have enough have long-term or short-term borrowings, which that indicator we don't have on here because we didn't have any comparisons because we don't borrow at this rate. So if you look at this fiscal scoring system, no, Connie, go back, stay there. We have no score for any of the indicators, whereas most schools don't have any score. They're around 5.3. Central New York schools, 7.6, and the medium upstate comparison is 4.4. But if you look at that flow of the blues, when you get up to 25, you become susceptible. When you get up to 45, you become moderately stressed. And if you go 65 or above on any of the scores, that's when they say that you're in significant stress. And there's very few districts in the state that are in significant stress. And there's only 31 districts across the state that get any scoring designation at all. So as a general rule, this shows that districts are still maintaining their own. If you go to the environmental comparisons, these ones are interesting. This is the district on the left. This is the economically disadvantaged students. So our free and reduced lunch rate generally around 47% compared to all schools across the state, which is only 43.6. Central New York is pretty much on par with us, and upstate New York just a touch less. And I left the numbers on the bottom here. So this is 668 total schools across the district, 48 schools that are considered Central New York, and 224 of those schools that are considered upstate schools. The Common Branch class size were higher by 1 on most of the comparisons there. That's just a law of averages because we have quite a large school. Go ahead, the teacher turnover rate. This is where we get a little higher than some of the other schools. I think that's interesting. I can't speak to why that is. We have been eliminating positions over the last few years, so that could be some of it too. Our percentage change in property value is basically in line with the rest of Central New York.
Hey, Maureen. Sorry, let me back up for turnover rate of all teachers. Is that a pure measurement? So example, whether we eliminate a position or someone retires, that's turnover, right?
Yeah.
So the age or experience of our workforce certainly can play into that massively, right?
Yep, exactly. The budget vote approval, yep, go down one more. Our approval rate was 66.7% this year, a little less than the averages. They were closer to 70 and 71%. And the ELL, we don't have any English language learners that score. So that doesn't become an indicator. So if you move us forward here, we do have a score and it's 15, and it's very similar to all schools at 15.9 and just a little bit ahead of the Central New York schools. So as far as all of the financial, fiscal, and environmental stresses or indicators, we're basically on par with all of our peers. What is cool about this is they also offer you a program that you can use. So if you move us forward, Connie, for the financial factors, obviously the environmental factors, we don't have any control over really, but you can now move forward for financial possibility. No, I'm talking about the slide, sorry. If you look, I know, if you look over to the right under the red, there's 2 more years out, and those numbers are just numbers that I have plopped into that system. So our operating fund balance, our unassigned fund balance, the 6.8 million that we've been talking about, I'm projecting we're using 3 million next year and 3 million the year after that. So you can see the number going down. And so the next line is full fund balance. So you're going to take it down the same 3 million on both of those. And then the other ones I've left fairly pretty much the same, not a lot of change. The expenditures going up a couple million and the revenues staying the same. So if you push that forward, go to the next slide, Connie. You can put that into this system. Go ahead, one, Connie.
I'm working on it.
Okay, sorry, honey. If you look down there, it does pop one score on our unassigned fund balance, because then we are going to be getting it down into a fairly low position, which might have some liquidity issues for us, but still would be in a no designation as far as fiscal stress. So I just think this is something good to understand or look at, putting that out the next 2 years, as because our plan is that we are going to use that unappropriated fund balance to kind of see us through the next couple of years.
So Maureen, anything we have control over though, which is, they're measuring a bunch of things that, and to your point, we've done some very intentional things to get that fund balance up. And so that's put us in a good spot. But all of that pales in comparison to whether or not they cut state aid by 20%, right? I mean, so the biggest indicator on this, we don't have control over.
Right. But this at least gives us a little something to look at as we do. I mean, we have control over that, whether we spend it down or not. Yeah. And this is just a bar graph showing that potential. If we were to put that number in, use that number, these slides show where we would go in the next 2 years. So unassigned fund balance would be used, go down to almost less than 1%. You can move forward, Connie. Reserves would stay similar to what they are now, because the reserves are a part of the fund balance, but they're not part of that unassigned operating fund balance. Our operating deficit would actually go back to what it was in 2018. It would be pretty much equal. And our cash investment in line with our current liability would say about the same.
And so Maureen, based on all that, the projection then would be that our fiscal stress goes up, even though everything we've done would adequately address, what we're facing. right?
Yeah, so the fiscal stress would go up, it would pop us a score, but it still would be considered no designation. So,
Right.
you know, when they come out with this every year and they put the list of districts that are in the paper that are under fiscal stress, we would not make that article. So go ahead, Connie. Yep, we're done there. So just any questions, thoughts on that? I like it just because it gives you a little idea of what we would be doing to ourselves if we were to come through with that plan.
Maureen, I also think it's important that every time a community members hear you do this, that we remind them that when we talk about reserves, we can talk about all of the unfunded mandates that the governor, you know, seems to put in place year after year, that if we didn't have money in reserves, that just comes out of the general fund.
Oh, definitely. And if you don't have money in reserves, you basically get your hand slapped for that too, because
Right.
they'll say that you are not properly planning for your future.
Right.
The next presentation I have is our property tax cap calculation.
Hey, Maureen, sorry, just one, you don't have to go back to the presentation, Connie, to the other one, that's fine, but no, just in the, down the road, Maureen, could we see the trend? So what stuck out is in the environmental factors, obviously the turnover. So I'm just wondering if down the road, maybe we could dig into that a little, because I think it's important to understand retirement versus reduction and elimination versus, you know, someone just, if we're cycling through teachers leaving, and I'm not saying we're doing this, by the way, but there are districts out there where just because of the bad working environment, they're cycling through and they're having a lot of turnover of teachers coming in and going out to other districts. So I'd like to measure that, but also the trend line, like that 14% is up from previous years, but how significantly?
Yeah. And honestly, Andy, I don't know if I know exactly what that number is comprised of. I would have to get with Arena because that's coming out of the data warehouse where all of like the beds data and all of that type of stuff is going through. It's where the scores are when we had scores for testing that are lined up with teachers. The teachers are all in there, the classrooms are in there, and that's where those turnovers come from. It's a total totals that pop out of that system. So I have to look into that to see if I can know what's going on with it.
Well, Andy, and to your point, there's a certain very large school district in Onondaga County, considered one of the big five, and they seem to cut about 30 to 35% of their teaching staff every year, and then possibly hire a lot of them back if those teachers don't jump ship and we hire them. So I'd like to see how Syracuse City School District compare, you know what I mean, on that factor with such a massive turnover rate.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, the big five, or yeah, the big five, I guess they are, but Syracuse City, Buffalo, Rochester, Yonkers, and Nassau, maybe Nassau County, aren't in New York City, are not in and never are in any of those types of presentations. They don't file ST3s. They don't.
right.
They don't have voter approved budgets, and none of that stuff is in there. So they never are in the mix when it comes to any of the data that pops out as you compare school districts.
Go figure, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Shocker.
Okay, so I put the property tax cap on tonight because Tom has given me the directive that we are not going to levy any increased taxes this year. So that gave me what I needed to move forward to make the calculation. And I got with fiscal advisors just to make sure that I do the right thing when I file with the comptroller's office. So the property tax cap legislation went into effect now. It's been, I think, like 7 or 8 years. But basically, it limits the total levy that school districts are allowed. And it doesn't have anything to do with the assessed value or the tax rates. It's only about the levy. So all independent school districts are subject now to the property tax cap. Oh, well, here it is, actually. So the big 4 city school districts, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Yonkers, are not included in this because they don't have voter approved budgets. So basically, if you look at revenues, this is total revenues of all schools across the state. The green boxes are the real property taxes, or the tax levy. So in most districts, we talk about this when we look at our revenues. More than half, 53% of revenues across the state for all school districts comes from property taxes. So this really does, as a total across the state, have a lot of impact on school budgets. For districts like us, where it's only taxes are only 37% of our revenue, it's not as impacting as it is for some of the districts where taxes are the opposite, 70% of their revenues. So the legislation, go ahead, Connie. It's a long calculation. It basically starts with your prior year levy. You can put in allowable growth factors, which they tell you what that is. That's basically how much your assessments are going up, and they give you a rate that comes from the Office of Real Property. And then you also get a tax-based growth factor, which has to do with real estate in the area. You put in and take out your pilots, your exclusions, your capital and your debt service from year to year, because that, remember when we go and vote, if we have capital projects that we bond for, or we purchase school buses that we bond for, those become exclusions and then are put back in because that's not considered part of your property tax increase. That's a voter approved separate increase. So as you put all that together, it pops out a calculation that becomes your, basically your property tax cap. Go ahead, Connie. This is the calculation. And I wish I had a pointer, but if you look at, it's right under, yep, go down right there, allowable levy. That little piece right there, the allowable levy growth factor, it's from 1 to 1.2%. That is where the 2% tax cap comes from. Even though that's just that one little piece of the formula, that's where people think your taxes can only go up 2%, and it's misnamed 2% property tax cap. So if we go down to the next slide, this is our formula. We start with this year's levy, put in our tax base growth factor, add in our pilots and our exclusions, which are our capital exclusions, our projects and our bus purchases. You get an adjusted current tax levy. You then multiply that by the lesser of the 2% or the consumer price index. So this year that's less than 2%. So it's only going up 1.23%. And you get a calculated number that you adjust for again. Then you put in next year's pilots and go to the next page, Connie, and you put in next year's capital tax levies, and you come to a maximum allowable tax levy, which for us would be 2.63%. Hold on, I gotta find it. And essentially, yep, it's 2.56%, which in terms of numbers is $765,560. So what you do is, what I do now is I apply fund balance there in the calculation that we submit to the comptroller's office so that we have a 0% tax levy increase estimated for the next year. So essentially, of our applied fund balance that we are going to be using going forward, $765,560 will basically be the levy that we don't levy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so Maureen, tell me if I'm dumbing this down correctly or not. To all the taxpayers, what this is saying is, assuming that this is the adopted budget could reflect the fact that we did not increase property taxes by $750,000, even though we would have been under the limit to do so. And based on history, it almost certainly would have passed.
Correct.
Yeah,
That is correct.
Yep. And so that's why I'm putting 2 slides here to discuss that exact thing. So I want you to keep in mind that true tax rate increases, which are what are on our bills every year, are different from what we discuss when we talk about our levy increases in April when we adopt our budgets. We have to do an estimate at that point, and we do the estimate based on town assessments and equalization rates being unchanged, which if you look at this chart on the left-hand side, these were the numbers. I go back and just pull them out of the presentations from each year, but these are the numbers. Say 16, 17, we predicted it would be $19.33 per thousand on your taxes. But then you move forward to the right-hand side. In August, when we actually do the taxes, it turns out to be $18.95 per thousand, because at that point, actual town assessments have come in and equalization rates have been finalized. Go back to that, Connie. So if you look over in the August one, in 16-17, our tax rate per thousand was $18.91. And right now it's $18.84. So the property tax cap is keeping the rate in line. Does that make sense? So next year, if we don't do a levy, that tax rate will actually go down. And the other thing I want to make sure that we all say out loud, go ahead, Connie, to the next page, is because we are only one piece of a 3-piece formula, New York State gives us the equalization rate. The town assessors give us the assessments, and then the school district lays the levy on there. not every person will see a decrease because some people will still go up depending on what happens with their assessments and their equalization rates.
And I think that happened with Hastings last year, right? People were saying that it had gone up so much, correct?
Yes. Yes, because the calculation is across 11 townships, they don't all, and they all are not at full assessment at any given year. Some people's bills go up and others go down. And it happens every year. So if we were to go to the August board meeting and pull up the tax spreadsheet that we adopted, you could look at it and, like say 3 of the townships would be decreasing rates and 5 of them would be increasing. So I just want to make sure that everybody is really careful to say we are not increasing the levy, but
Right.
that does not mean that an individual person's taxes may or may not go up.
With the equalization rates, correct?
Yep, and the assessments. Yep.
Right, because to your point, Maureen, whether or not we quote increase their rate, we're only one cog in the wheel, and we're doing our part to not do that this year.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
So
but
listen up, town people.
No, but I just think that's something that we got to be really aware of, because obviously we're gonna try to educate everybody that we are not increasing the levy because it's just not the year to do that. But then it doesn't mean that I guarantee you my father's taxes are going to go up, because he's the one that will come to me and say, you said, they weren't going to go up, but it's only one piece. Any questions, thoughts on that?
Not for
Go
me.
ahead, Connie. I think I'm good.
Thank you, Maureen. Great job.
Yes, nice.
Yep. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent work. Good info. And I'm sure you're on the docket for the next meeting too, with something budget related. So.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the next meeting, we've got to do the letter of intent for the buses, because we need to get in line for our buses. And we'll go through the bus debt, and then we'll start working on a budget.
Right. Thank you. With that, we'll move into reports, and nothing really under unfinished business. So I'll open it up first to Mrs. Fishman if she has anything to bring up. Oh, what good timing, right as Katie walks in. That's good.
No, the only thing that I wanted to raise is, I sent out an email, and I think most of you are familiar with the email, trying to put something together from the board with respect to, our appreciation of the staff and the administration and everything everybody's doing. And so the only real discussion or question that I had was, I had talked about just, us with our adopted schools, units, whatever we have adopted, chipping in and just doing that on behalf of the board or for the staff, on behalf of the board, thanking them for all their, the extra effort that everybody seems to be putting in this year. But I did, want to follow up, because I know historically we had a budget for the board that we used for, the board conferences and things like that. And so I didn't know if we cut that with all the cuts that we did, or, if that is still there, if that's something that we should consider, diverting a little bit of funds to do something like this. I don't know what the rules are with respect to that. So, I just wanted to throw that out there. I know we do the teacher appreciation 5-year, 10-year things out of that. And so I was wondering, kind of brainstorming and just putting it out there for everybody to consider.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, Maureen, I'm sure you don't have everything memorized, but I know we did make an adjustment or a cut or whatever to the budget. I just don't remember the amount. And Christy, to your point, I think there are very strict rules about what we can and can't do, like, because it's a gift of public funds otherwise. So like recognition programs are allowed. But Maureen obviously would know more than I on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, obviously the board budget is very small, and it only has in it your trainings, your in your meetings, when you go to the state
Conference.
conference. Right.
Yeah.
And it does have some money there for the recognitions. There is the association dues, and that's where you made the cut last year. You're no longer doing the National School Boards Association.
Right. And
Right.
historically, but even with or without that cut, historically, I think we've always been well under that budget, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we didn't attend any of the conferences or anything this year, so that's what I was speaking to. I didn't know if we had cut that because we knew we weren't going, there wasn't gonna really be, an in-person conference. Whether we cut that out as part of the cuts that we made earlier in the year, or if that was still there. But again, I realize that there's a lot of rules with respect to that, so I wasn't sure if that was something that was even possible. And Lori had mentioned reaching out to the PTOs and things like that. Certainly an idea, but what I put out was more on behalf of the board, not on behalf of the PTOs or the, parent-teacher relationship. And so, I'm still open to it, and I'm still planning on doing something. And anybody that's interested certainly can respond and let me know.
We do recognition cakes.
We do, but now there's nobody in person to eat them.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing, I talked to a few people, and I think there's I don't know what the rules are. I mean, rules with respect to the spending of money, but also rules with respect to COVID. Does it all have to be individually wrapped? Is this something that, one or two of us could go out to BJ's and, buy even just bags of chips, just something to drop off in break rooms or, main offices for the teachers that are coming in. The janitors, the nurses, the bus drivers at the bus garage maintenance, all that stuff. And so it was just an idea that I had that I threw out there, and I just wanted to, clarify for anybody that, may not have seen it in the emails.
All right. And anything else, Christy?
No, that was it.
All right. I believe our student board rep is on. So Jacob, if you're on or off mute, did you have anything you needed to bring up?
No, not today.
All right, thank you. Open it up to the rest of the board. Any topics for discussion?
Yeah, Andy, I have just some stellar news. I won't say her name, but we have a Central Square senior that has signed a letter of intent to attend the Coast Guard Academy. So to all of my other service members there, and I've always wanted to have somebody that's going to the Coast Guard at graduation, but we have somebody that is going to be going to the Coast Guard Academy. So I couldn't be more proud of her. I couldn't be more excited. And just for a little pride, the Coast Guard Academy is one of the hardest universities to get into in the United States. It is the amount of people that apply and the amount of people they let in is one of the hardest in the country. So congratulations to her.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats. We'll look forward to the day when her family or whatever is going to reveal the name and everything. And same thing, I'm sure names won't be revealed, but I believe it's 100% confirmed that we have someone that's been accepted anyway to one of the other military academies. I don't know if they've committed yet or not. And actually, I think 2 other academies. So man, we may be going for one in every branch this year. That would be fantastic. So.
I would like to say if we have a graduation, I'd be able to, I will show up like Mike in my uniform, but I would have to sneak up on my uniform really, really hard.
We'll definitely have a graduation. It may be 12 hours long like it was last year, but we will definitely have a graduation.
Well, that is great news. Any other topics that anyone wanted to bring up? All right, well, so for me, number one, apologies to the board. I said last week, I over-promised and under-delivered on a letter to Oswego County Health, so I will get that draft. The draft is done, I just never sent it to you. So I'll send it to you, but the intent of that letter is, and I'm gonna distribute it to Oswego County school boards as well to see if they can really lobby, but the reality is I'm gonna call, frankly, cry foul on Oswego County Health to keep with the sports analogy, punting on a decision about having spectators. They've said no spectators for now for sports that they've allowed, which to use all the buzzwords, doesn't follow the science, doesn't follow the guidance, doesn't follow the anything. Onondaga County does have a plan in place to allow it. And Oswego County Health, quite frankly, never even solicited our input, feedback, thoughts, or anything else. And the reality is that almost everyone agrees that down the road, they're going to allow it. So they're just punting now to avoid a decision. And so I'll send that over to you guys, and it doesn't require any sort of official vote or anything. So we'll do the feedback via email, any changes to the letter, and then I will get that sent over immediately.
Andy, the science is very different in Onondaga County. Extremely different.
It's very true. It's very true, Tim. It's a good point. I did also want to mention, because I forgot to earlier, that when we did personnel tonight, we approved 3 retirements, and it's always, and we do this as recognition too, but it's always sad, only 3 people retired, and yet it's almost 100 combined years of educational experience. So to that whole discussion earlier about turnover, I don't want to stop people from retiring. They've earned it. It's great for them, but it's certainly a loss to the district. And so we'll look forward to recognize them, hopefully in person later in the year. And that's all I have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Colabufo for the superintendent's report.
I'm just responding to the parent immediately after. Okay.
Yeah, just food for thought for everyone. So we're happy to take questions in the chat window. Doesn't mean they're going to be addressed here. So the point of the public forum is for a speaker to address a topic with the board, to provide kind of a 3-minute feedback to the board, but we don't generally respond to them because it's at that point, it's not well thought out. We don't have consensus from the board. So Mr. Colabufo in his presentation, I think, is probably going to address most of the questions that I've seen in there. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to him.
Yes. So basically, here's the timeline regarding in-person learning at the high school and the middle school. I'm going to be talking about it right now. I'm going to share the results of the survey. I'm going to share the decision on what it's going to look like moving forward. And then I'm going to be, as I just put in the chat, blasting this out to staff and all parents of students at Paul V. Moore High School and Central Square Middle School immediately following this board meeting. So the topic, obviously, as I said, in-person learning, high school, middle school. The timeline: on February 1st at 6 p.m., our principals from Paul V. Moore High School and Central Square Middle School, along with our assistant superintendent for instruction and personnel, Conchetta Galvan, led a parent forum detailing the specific changes to the current learning model for Paul V. Moore and Central Square Middle School if we were to transition to a hybrid learning model where students would receive both in-person learning and remote instruction throughout each week. What I am going to be putting out right after this with the parent blast and the staff blast, a couple key links that were discussed on that parent forum. And one of them is it focuses on the changes and the impacts that would take place if we went to a hybrid model, again, with in-person learning happening for a couple days a week and then remote for the remainder of the week. So that it's a very detailed list. And then the other link that will be part of that is the frequently asked questions document that the administration had shared with the parent forum on Monday. So that's very detailed. At the very top of that, it talks about the survey and get that in. Well, obviously, the survey has been closed. The deadline was 11:59 on Thursday. So that's basically where we're at, with that. I will say now, getting down to the results, there was an overwhelming majority of parents and guardians from both Paul V. Moore High School and Central Square Middle School that wanted to keep everything that is currently happening at the high school and middle school still going on. Now, does that mean everybody? No, of course not. There are parents that are saying that taken everything in consideration. They want to keep their kids remote. So here are the numbers. Paul V. Moore High School, 72% of the parents are asking to keep everything the same as it currently is, which is remote for the majority of people. High need special education students are obviously, are coming in. We're busing in students that have poor or no internet at home. And we've been bringing in students to the high school and the middle school that needed more structure. And we're providing that for them as they are there throughout the day. And they're able to use our Wi-Fi at the same time. So it was 72% wanted to keep everything the same at the high school. At the middle school, it was 67%. So when I say 72%, that's out of the total population of 1,107 students. The middle school, it was 67% out. The middle school, as I said, 67% out of the 794 students were asked to keep them remote as they currently are. So again, 33% wanted in-person learning at the middle school, 28% wanted in-person at the high school. There was definitely a kind of a switch in the number of phone calls. Well, still the same amount of phone calls, but it kind of went a different way starting probably around a month and a half ago, and consistently to my work cell phone on the weekends, after school, during the school, calling me at work and sending me emails. And a big part of it was the way that Oswego County does their quarantines. And this seemed to be the question that it's not an exaggeration for me to say 175 people have asked me or more, parents, at the middle school and the high school. And that is in Oswego County, 45 minutes or more would require everybody in that classroom to be quarantined. In Onondaga County, it is 1 hour or more. So when they build their classes, they have traditional schedules. So, 40, 42 minutes. What I don't understand is they still have the same amount of cases in their high school. I don't understand how that's reported. I'm not throwing certain school districts under the bus in Onondaga County, but it still blows my mind because they're going to be in the same room. They do move from room to room. They're not all in pods. So eventually that number will get over that threshold of 1 hour. So I'm a little perplexed by that when I look at the public dashboard that shows all of the school districts and the high schools and middle schools in Onondaga County that actually have students in session. And you see a really high number of cases. I've often wondered, what is that doing for their number of quarantines? So basically, where we're at, those were the results. So we said it from the beginning. We were going to be very communicative. We were going to be very transparent. The question is, well, okay, why didn't we start this way at the beginning of the year? Well, there's a lot of differences. For one, we had no idea that the spread rate was going to practically be non-existent in schools, as now the health department, the governor, and local elected officials have now seen. Our teachers had did a really good job and a huge lift as we listened to the over 1,400 parents that took the survey from last year regarding in-person learning that said we needed to make massive changes. They said kudos to the teachers to pivoting on a dime and literally shifting to in-person learning at the drop of a hat. I'm sorry, to remote learning at the drop of a hat. But what they really were hoping for was more synchronous instruction rather than just giving students things to work on. They wanted that direct instruction, that live instruction. So that's why we went all in at Central Square and we went with Canvas. And I got really good feedback from parents who were a little bit frustrated in the spring of last year that their students, their children, knew when to log on. They saw the level of instruction and rigor that teachers were providing. The teachers were accessible. They responded to parents when parents reached out to them. So it was pretty much day and night. And again, no disrespect. That's not any fault to the teachers. We just gave them better tools, such as Canvas from last spring. So that's that in itself is a really big thing. The other factor that played into it was literally only 3.5 weeks ago, there were 1,400 cases, active positive cases in Oswego County. Now, the last I looked, I believe today it was 266 throughout the entire county. We are still waiting for the governor to lift his restrictions regarding the 6 foot of separation rule. I know a parent asked that, and we actually said from the beginning that if the governor eased up on that, if he went to a 3 foot rule, let's say, but students had to wear masks all the time, that would allow us to bring back more students. So I don't want anybody to think that we just arbitrarily are keeping this 6 foot rule going. We are not. From the very beginning, whenever we had a case in a classroom, we get contacted by the state and they want to know exactly what the square footage are in the rooms. They want to know how many people were in those rooms, everybody, whether that's just students, that's special education teachers that push in and whatnot. And then their mathematicians are figuring out, did we go above the 6 foot of separation rule? Chris Todd is the DS in Oswego County, and he would have to report school districts that are violating this because it is part of the reopening plan. It is not a recommendation. We have to follow that 6 foot rule. If it gets reduced to 3 feet, we'll obviously be able to bring more people in. If it gets reduced to nothing and they say, like Mr. Martin's point a little while ago, when he talked about how things don't seem to be aligning with the governor or the health department. Again, the health department's falling in place from the governor. And what he's saying is with the restrictions. Well, so I get asked by parents this regularly, usually every day. How can we have, basketball where you're covering somebody, you're going to be within 6 feet. Yes, you're wearing a mask, but you're within 6 feet. But yet we have to have the 6 foot of separation rule. So I'm not a hypocrite. I've said from the beginning, if they remove that, that'll allow us to then bring our students back in. So looking at the majority of what the parents, filling out the survey, basically came out and said the majority in both schools wanted to keep everything the same. It is interesting that a lot of the parents that originally over the summer, where it was about 98% wanted to send their kids in, not the 28% at the high school or 33% at the middle school now. At the middle school back then, it was about 96%, 97%. But they wanted to tell me why. They didn't have to, but they wanted to say regarding the quarantines, and also many of them work in districts where they actually have high school and middle school. And at first, what they were saying was, I want in-person for my kid. I want in-person for my kid. Then they actually saw what in-person was for their students, which consisted of 1, 2, or 3 kids in a classroom. And the teacher, the only way to be able to do it is synchronous simultaneously, because if teachers are teaching all day, when are they supposed to connect with all of those kids who are at home 3 days a week? Because the teachers are teaching 5 days a week to give everybody 2 full days a week. So that was an issue. So the parents said to me, Tom, what parents need to understand when they're calling you is it's not what they think in person would be because of that 6 foot rule. And because we have, now we know an overwhelming majority of parents that want to keep their kids home for whatever reason that, that they feel comfortable with. So it would be 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 kids in a classroom. Middle school basically would have operated between 16 and 18 students on an entire team based on the number of, at this point, it was 319 when this survey came out of the 794. Since then, even more parents have called myself or Mrs. Galvan or Mr. Penrod and said, I signed my daughter or son up for hybrid. I was thinking about it. I want to pull that. I don't want them. So I don't want you to have skewed information because I'm not going to be sending them back in. So that was really important for us to know, so when I say right now that the middle school is operating at 67% that want to just keep their kids home, that number could be even higher tomorrow because we didn't get a chance to change the last ones that the parents are emailing me after 4:00. So I'm not making judgment on any of the parents. I didn't make any judgment on the parents over the summer when it was flip-flop the other way. A lot of them have reasons and just basically say, as long as that there's sports, they also understand that if anybody on a sports team or in band and whatnot tests positive, things are shut down for 10 days. If a school has to go on a pause, so let's just say it worked out where it wasn't like this, that maybe the middle school had the majority of parents wanted to send their kids in. So we were doing 2 days a week for every kid in person, but the high school wanted to stay, remote. If the middle school found that there was quarantine numbers, I don't see how there wouldn't be. So one student in a building where students are switching, even if we tried to make it isolated pods, they still have their special areas that really couldn't be in isolated pods. The spread rate, unlike an elementary classroom, would take out 12 or 13 students and possibly the teacher and maybe a couple kids on the bus. In the middle school and high school, would significantly take out more. So parents asked me those questions. I gave them the honest answers because there was no way that I was going to say to parents, well, yeah, there probably wouldn't be quarantines. I gave them the numbers. The high school right now in Central Square leads the district for positive cases for students. Middle school is third, one behind I believe it was 15. One of the elementaries had 16 for students. So I just wanted them to know what it would look like if one student, came in, tested positive, and just it's a different kind of spread factor. I'm not worried about the cases because everything that we've seen has shown that it's not spreading in schools, but the health department is still following those quarantines. So by me just sharing this with many families, they were like, we're going to call you back. We're going to think about it. I want to talk with my husband or vice versa. And when they did, they said, I want my kid to go hybrid. I was very upfront and very clear with them. And that was that they asked me, if the governor lifted his restrictions, would you bring more kids back? And the answer to that has always been absolutely. So are there going to be parents that are upset about this? Absolutely. I totally understand that there will be. I can't show them a crystal ball to say, look at how many we would avoid, quarantines by doing it this way. All I can say is to upset the apple cart for the minority number of parents that want to have their kids come in would just be reckless because of the changes that I am going to be putting out to all parents. And the staff have already seen this, but I'm going to show them as well. It would mean 2.5 more hours of screen time for the students at home. It would mean that we would be busing those kids in much earlier. Those are things that we would have done had these numbers obviously not been so one-sided to keep remote going.
So first for the board and then for Tom. For the board, it's important to understand that number one, we don't decide this. We don't have to or get to approve the plan, the changes to the plan, anything like that. But obviously, we work in conjunction with Tom and his staff, and it's important for us to give feedback. So definitely give feedback. Tom, can you just speak quick, though? You kind of ended there on the parents' preference, but at the end of the day, and this is based on something you sent us in email, you and your staff are in lockstep in believing that based on parameters right now, this is the best model to continue going forward. So it is the preference based on parameters before you right now.
Absolutely. And it's always going to be some people saying, well, somebody else's perception might see it differently for their child that still learns better, in the classroom in the traditional way with all of the students in the classroom. But yes, Andy, if you're asking me, I've had many conversations with the CSTA leadership, with the vice president, Nicole Heath, and the president, Lynn Dowler, because I wanted teachers' input. I talked to teachers in the hallways. And yes, as much as they miss the students, and we all miss the students, but it's not as easy as just to say, well, in-person learning, and then, as opposed to, the students that would be at home. It really is breaking down what it would look like. And what I'm seeing with other districts and what some of our teachers in our high school, middle school who live in other districts whose children are going in person in the middle school and high school, it's instruction on remote days are pretty much non-existent. I live in a district where I have neighbors that are saying the high school kids are saying it's fine when we go in and we get our 40 minutes, but there's 3 days where we're not getting anything. And I'm not knocking that district. Other districts that do that, that's what they chose to do from the very beginning. we went with a very strong instructional model, and we took the 1,400 responses from the spring, the need for one learning management platform, not 8. We wanted to be able to parents to be able to know that we made those changes. We could not have enacted what we did for remote learning and then said, but we're going to have the students come in 2 days a week at that point, because there was no way we could have done the synchronous simultaneous instruction, and we didn't know about the spread rate and whatnot. So again, this is one of those things, hindsight's 2020, but everybody I have spoken with, we wouldn't have changed going back. One thing I do want to say, Andy, real quick is, out of the roughly, I think now it's probably 290 students whose parents at the middle school said that they want in-person learning out of the 794. We have a lot of students that we bring into the middle school. We have space and availability to still bring more in. And right before we had the massive spike where we were seeing, just a ridiculous amount of cases in Oswego County daily, we had a plan ready to bring in over 100 more students. So what Matt Penrod spent a lot of time today with Connie Yelvine looking to say, okay, those exact parents that wanted more in person for their learning at the middle school, what can we do for them? What can we do for the 2 hours a day that we could bust them in the morning before the teachers actually do their remote, learning from their classrooms, to give them more what they need? And at the high school, it's the same thing. I walked out of my office, I see a lot of kids spread out in the library. I see a lot of kids spread out in the large group instruction room, and it's staffed. And so their needs are being met. We can still accommodate more. So we're still looking at that, but I think the big thing, and I just literally an hour before the board meeting, I was speaking to another parent on my cell phone, and they understood, they wanted it, but they realized what in-person would actually look like with the 1 or 2 or 3 kids in the classroom. And the parent was thrilled that their kid is actually playing winter sports, basketball, this specific parent. So they have that. And then the daughter was in band. So those things are there, but the parent felt pretty happy knowing that if the governor lifts the 6-foot rule, whether it becomes a 3-foot rule, and we could, wrap our heads around what that could look, which then could be another survey to the parents. But they feel pretty good that Central Square will adapt to that. If the governor lifts the whole rule, 6-foot rule, then we could, return to normal.
All right. Any other questions from the board for Tom on this? All right. Anything else in your superintendent's report, Mr. Cobblefield?
Yes. This is a name that I've probably said, 700 times, and usually I'm corrected in how I say her name, but I always think that I say it correctly. Congratulations to senior Hannah Sywalski, amazing student, who attends Paul V. Moore High School, is being congratulated for recently being accepted into this year's NAFME All-Eastern Honors Treble Chorus. Hannah was accepted based on her NYSMA solo audition and recommendation from her high school vocal jazz director, Mrs. Veronica Mainville. According to the formula used for All Eastern, there are 11 states that are represented at All Eastern. Based on the population, New York State can only have 25% representation in the entire honors ensemble. The number of students who audition for NYSMA, coupled with the 25% limit, demonstrates that Hannah's accomplishment is truly tremendous. Hannah is one of 3 or 4 students to have ever been accepted into the All Eastern Honors Ensemble in the history of Central Square School District. Hannah has spent a great deal of her middle and high school career engrossed in music and theater. She is very active participant in musical program here at Paul V. Moore High School. If you've ever had an opportunity to go to a musical, you saw her, starring in numerous roles. Below are some of the in-school and out-of-school activities that Hannah spends her time and energy in. She works at Syracuse Children's Theater, music director and production direction for 2 years, runs the Brewerton Elementary Drama Club for the last 4 years, wind ensemble, 4 years performing on French horn, president of the Paul V. Moore High School Drama Club, teaches private piano and voice for 2 years, and takes private piano, French horn, and voice lessons. Secretary of the Paul V. Moore National Honor Society for 2 years, all county and all state honors ensemble performing on French horn and voice in 7th grade. Conference All-State, 2 years, mixed choir and treble choir. Music theater at Paul V. Moore High School, leading roles in Seussical, Legally Blonde, Bye Bye Birdie, Sound of Music, High School Musical. It's crazy. I've been in this district for 5 years, and it seems like it's just another day that I see her performing on that stage. Vocal jazz, 4 years, field band, 2 years, community service, parade band, 3 years, student government, 2 years. Remarkable student. I wanted to read all that because Hannah is not the only one. I just wanted to be able to let you know these are things that all students have the opportunity to take part in. Maybe some of them not to the level of Hannah, but we have students that take advantage of our fine arts programs, our sports programs. And I just can't wait to be able to get back to normalcy where COVID is behind us and we are watching all of our students perform in our schools, in our classrooms, and in the athletic arena. That is it, Andy.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Colabufo. Congratulations to Hannah. Good job on the name, Tom. With that, we're going to move into our last item, and this is going to get a little bit weird, so let me do this. Just trust me on this one. I'm going to make a motion with changes, and then we'll open it up for discussion because it's less complicated than doing it the other way. So I'm going to suggest or make a motion that we accept item H1, the approval of the first reading of proposed districts policies, with the following changes. Removing for now policy 1640 for consideration and making an alteration to policy 1611, removing the words to be considered. And with that, I'll ask for a second so we can open discussion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Loy. So now open it up for discussion. I gave Mrs. Phillips a heads up on this. So let's start with the first one, which is I made the motion to remove policy 1640 because there's a lot of clarity I need, and Erin said it's not a problem delaying it, so she can get that from Bethany. But my concern is this, not my concern. What I need clarity on is this policy speaks to absentee and military ballots. In theory, it follows education law, but it's just boggling to me because for an absentee ballot, basically any Joe, Schmo, or Sally off the street can simply say, hey, I'm not going to be in Oswego County that day. If you're in the military, there's 3 paragraphs about what you have to fill out and validate and everything under the sun. And it's just ridiculous to me that we would put such stringent parameters on a military person, and yet anyone else can just say, yeah, I'm just going to be out of the county that day. So I just want to make sure, because I'm uncomfortable as a board putting our name to that without further clarity. So that's number one. And number two, on policy 1611, it's worded right now that it says annual training is to be considered mandatory. And I asked Erin, I said, it just doesn't make sense to me. Let's just have the policy say that annual training is mandatory. And she was good with that. Erin, speak up if you're not, because that was through chat. And I want to make sure I represent you correctly.
Andy, excuse me, I lost you for a second. Can you give, like, in 15 seconds, the first one you discussed?
Yeah, I just need clarity, Tim, because the rules outlined in that policy, which are based on state ed law for absentee voters, just general, are very lax and easy. They just have to say they're going to be out of the county. But there's a lot of rules and procedures for a military person, when the reality is they're going to be out of Oswego County. And so I just asked Erin if it was a problem, if we got clarity. I want Bethany to validate that that's really what education law is saying, because it seems totally out of place to me.
Thank you. And I would wholeheartedly concur. Like you say, the military has to go through hoops, and, you know, again, right, wrong, or different, it became a circus this year across the country. So I
Right.
would be opposed to anything that doesn't change what's currently there.
Yeah, and even I'll go further, Aaron, you can kind of mention this to Bethany, because what I'm wondering is, I would like to err on the side, we want to make it as easy as possible, obviously, for our service members. And if the benchmark is simply saying they're out of Oswego County, then that's the benchmark that the military should have to meet, right? And I just want to verify with her that we can do that, because otherwise it's going to seem like we are making it harder for them. So,
Well, in addition, what's the audit trail for if I say I'm out of the county and I throw in a vote and I go to the town hall or the Legion where I vote? There's no audit trail. There's no check of that. There is not today. So it's much bigger than what we're talking about even here.
yep. So any other discussion before we vote? Because we will be voting on it as stands, which is, so 1640 will come back around, but 1611, we'd be removing the words "to be considered." It would simply say that the annual training is mandatory.
So voting yes, to be clear, is the other one is, the voting one is coming back.
Right. What we're voting on does not include that military and absentee ballot. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? And again, I apologize. I meant to get this to you before the meeting, Mrs. Phillips. I didn't mean to spring it on you. So,
That's good. I'm good. I got notes.
all right. All right. Being no further discussion, Mr. Martin is a yes. Mrs. Fishman. I missed.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson, has she been added back in, Tom?
Did you see why she had to jump out?
Yeah, but she's back in.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Yes.
All right. So Mrs. Nickerson.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. Mr. Loyer.
Yes.
Mr. Patch.
Yes.
Mr. Hoyt.
Yes.
And Mrs. Sundit.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we move to move to a motion for executive session. I move that the Central Square School District Board of Education enter executive session for the purpose of to discuss matters leading to the appointment, tenure of a particular administrative person with no action to follow. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Loyer. Any discussion? For anyone in the meeting, we will not be coming back into this meeting after executive session. We will simply take notes of the motion to close executive session and then close out our regular meeting, but there will be no action. So Mr. Martin is a yes. Mrs. Fishman. Mrs. Wood.
Yeah.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. Nickerson.
Yes.
Mr. Loyer.
Yes.
Mr. Patch.
Yes.
Mr. Hoyt.
Yes.
And Mrs. Sundit. I saw her say yes, so it's a yes. It's 8:28, so we'll give just a couple minutes, but for the board members, close out of this meeting, there's a different link for the executive session, which Tom sent to everyone.
Yep. I sent it in your email.
All right. Thanks for all those that attended, and I'll see everyone in the board in a minute.
See you.
Right.